We've been in a meeting. We're continuing our meeting, but now we're back to open session, and we'll start with a pledge. And I'll lead it because I always make Brad do it. So I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, welcome everybody. We will get set. Perfect. And I've heard that there are people on vacation this week. I don't know who they are, but it's not us. And we'll continue, and we'll ask for any modifications. There we go. We're so no modifications. Public comment period. Anyone?
Yes, we have one name signed up, Greg Goodrich.
So Greg, you're signed up.
Mr. Docker. How you doing? How you doing, everyone? All right, so I just want to have a little update. You know, some of you guys weren't here before, and I wish you were here and we had everybody here so you could hear all the stories. I think you heard them downtown. Yeah. Right? All right. So it's just an impression, but everybody in Enfield, you know, I know it's a slow-moving train and it's not going to happen overnight, but people are still feeling like nothing's happening. All right? We don't see more people at the school to help, and we can see that they're understaffed. So today I had asked for some information about the school tool, and I just got that about an hour ago from Amanda Verba. And the purpose of that was, I think teachers are being told throughout the school district not to enter stuff in the school tool. And I see a lot of looks on faces, but I'm here to tell you, I've talked to a lot of teachers in a lot of buildings. Administrators are telling them, come to us before you enter anything. And you know what? The administrator has that right, because somebody in the school district has given the principals of the schools the right to decide what goes in the school tool. If a kid is found in violation of the code of conduct, the principal gets to choose if it goes into school tool, according to the email I got from Amanda Verba today. I'll forward that. I believe you got that also. So herein lies the problem, which is what is happening at Enfield. Lisa Rieger does not want to fill out any paperwork or have any kind of paper trail on the kids in discipline. All right? So she gets that power from you. You get your power from you guys. If we're going to have school tool and we're going to have it there to track, let's use it. Let's make it more concrete. If you get in trouble, you break the code of conduct, you hit somebody, it goes in there. If you physically assault another student, it needs to be entered into school tool, no matter who you are. And if anybody thinks that's wrong, please raise your hand now. Secondly, I'm a little bit insulted that I keep being referred to like I'm a racist. You know what? I'm not racist. Most of us aren't racist. Does racism exist? Yes. So it just so happens that the bully in the case of my daughter, the one that hit her, the one that tormented her for weeks, is of a different race. I didn't go after him because of that. I went after him because he went after my daughter. All right? It's kind of, you know, defeating that everybody treats us like we're a bunch of racists. We're not. All we want is all the kids to get help. And you know what? If a kid has a problem, whether he's white, black, Hispanic, whatever, let's get him the help early. We can't have principals out there deciding to wait months and months and months into the school year because we don't want to label a kid in elementary school, and this is a quote I got in a meeting, because if we give him an aid, he's probably going to drop out of school by the time he's in 9th grade. Right? Is that what the statistics say? Because I believe that's what you told me. All right? So, still to this day, I've not gotten a safe plan for my daughter at the school. I have never received a receipt letter for the DASA reports I submitted to Lisa Rieger. Those were submitted in early December, late November. Is that acceptable? that I got no reply. She could have even told me they didn't count. She was throwing them away. But she didn't. Zero reply. Okay? So, as parents, we want Enfield to succeed. And we want, going forward, we want to get together and we want to have a plan going forward. And we want to work as a team. So we're trying to get together. You know, a lot of us are very emotional. A lot of us are just angry, you know, upset. These are our kids. You know, we're feeling like, you know, every time we say something, you know, we're the bad guys. But we have a couple ideas that we want to start with, what we plan, or what we would like to see going forward. First, once again, we'd like the removal of Lisa Rieger as principal of
All right, enough. You're over your time. You told last week to keep names out of it. If you have one more non-personnel related item, glad to hear it.
We want to have a parent, teacher, administrator, Board of Education, town hall at the school where we can have a back and forth. Because either we're so uneducated in the rules and we're responding inappropriately, or something's missing. There's a communication gap. You know?
Thank you, Greg.
Yeah.
Anyone else wish to speak now? And thank you, and we're on to student reps, and we have one.
All right, so not much has happened over the past couple of days because we're on spring break, but over the past 2 weeks, some of the social events that happened were bowling night, which is an all-senior event at the bowling drill. So around 60 to 70 seniors gathered and just had fun bowling. And also, the IHS Orchestra hosts cabaret night every year, and that was last Friday, I believe. And basically at cabaret night, it's a way for the orchestra to like raise money for the organization to like buy music, other resources that they need. And some of the performances that happened at cabaret night included K-pop, nunchucks, multiple different singing acts, interpretive dance, and a faculty band performance. So some teachers went up and performed some jazz, I believe. And for clubs, Model UN is competing at a national level conference at Cornell next week. They're sending around 12 to 13 delegates, and there's high expectation for success, as the club did very well at St. John Fisher 2 weeks ago. And a lot of members, they won Best Speaker and Debate awards at that competition. So they're expecting to do well at Cornell. And also at IHS, there's been an ongoing discussion between the student council and the janitorial staff about our not so great bathrooms. And I, alongside a couple of other representatives, sort of went through some of the boys' bathrooms around 3 to 4 weeks ago, so relatively recent. And just for example, in lower H, the left and middle sink out of the 3 sinks don't work at all. And then also in another bathroom, in lower G, 2 of the sinks, the left and the middle from the door, also don't work. And so we've been sort of updating, so some passionate teachers and students have been updating the janitorial staff about these issues, but not much has really changed in the past couple of weeks. So the students were wondering if there's a policy of communication between the janitorial staff and the board, or if it's just the janitorial staff, in charge of handling the issues. And that will be it.
Thanks. Board responses, anyone with an insight into this?
Six, sorry. It doesn't come to us at all. No, it's you need to put in a work order. Either the custodian or one of the teachers. Just complaining about it doesn't get it done. You actually have to fill out a work order.
The janitor has to fill out.
Janitor can or teacher can fill out a work order.
And then turn it in.
Turn it in. Yep. Goes in. What's the data system? I can't remember. Q. Goes in. We'll have somebody assigned till they're fixed.
But there's a head of custodians, there's a head of buildings and grounds, and we certainly, we talk to head of buildings and grounds, but we bring this up all the time, just, you know,
Get a work order in.
yeah, and it typically, we've seen this over and over again, it's if, Paul will say, if folks would just tell us about it. You know, they want the sinks to work, they want the bathrooms to be clean. Bathrooms at the high school seem to be an issue for a long time. A bunch of money was put into it, but you just have to go through the process. The guys are very responsive. They want to fix it. They want it clean, and so it's just part of that communication piece.
Yep. Thanks for the response.
Other board responses.
Anything?
Oh, I mean, just it's our time to
This is
respond
our
to
moment?
anything.
This
Right.
is our moment.
Yeah.
Mr. Goodrich, I was not here, like you said, when you guys all came and presented, and I wish I had been, because I heard I missed a hell of a meeting. But I did catch you guys downtown, and you're sitting next to one of my favorite people, and after we went through a lot together at Cornell. That's a good thing about having so much time in this town. I do want to address one thing you said by telling a story. So my elementary school had over 800 kids down in the Bronx. This is in the 70s. And we weren't angels. Right? Our poverty rate was extremely high. And at that time, most of the immigrants were Latinos, so we probably had 16 different dialects of Spanish in that building. And in 4th grade, our assistant vice president went on vacation, and as little rugrats, we did what little rugrats did, and we decided, what the hell, let's break in his office. We've never done that before, right? Rifle around in his office, Mr. Anderson was his name. We came across a file cabinet. And in that file cabinet logo hole, I found my name with blue cards. Blue cards were the referral materials that our teachers used in elementary school in the 70s and 80s, and any teacher here has been teaching that long, they know that, right? So they wrote your infraction on the blue card. Imagine my surprise when I found 144 blue cards under my name in 4th grade. 2 thoughts occurred to me at that moment. 1, I must be a really terrible child. And 2, even in 4th grade, it was obvious to me I couldn't possibly have been that bad of a child to have accumulated 144 of these cards, right? Now I tell that story in huge rooms of teachers. And I have my 5th grade report card to prove it. Academic skills off the charts. What they called social skills back then. Apparently I didn't respond to authority well. I had no respect. That was fascinating, just to see that dichotomy, right? And when I tell the story, it's fascinating to me, the response from the teachers in the room. The response I get most of the time is, how in the hell are you here, right? How are you sitting here today in the School Board of Education with Ivy League law degree, you haven't had several successful businesses, experience in marriage, living in upstate New York, how did I get out of it? And the feeling behind that is, I should be someplace else. Let me give you a couple of guesses of where those places I should be on. Right? They start with juvenile detention, they end up in these upstate prisons that have been fashioned off of the mistakes of children who look like them. Right? So when you say you don't have all of the understanding of what's going on, let me tell you at least some things I understand as a board member. We have tiered response systems here. So the child who makes a single mistake doesn't wind up in this thing called the school-to-prison pipeline, which, amazingly enough, for brown children, the percent of children in public schools who are in school suspension is the exact match to the percentage of brown children who are represented in New York State's prison system. You think that's accidental? Right? There are multiple components to this phrase you use called racism. Let me explain to you what I've learned in my 50 years on this planet about that word. There are racists who are personal animus against me and would drag me behind the truck just because of the color of my skin. There is no one in this room who is accusing you or anyone else at Enfield of that. There are other forms of racism that mean you could think you're doing the right thing, the absolute best thing for your family, or this brown child's family, for the community, and yet, unbeknownst to you, you are marching in lockstep with the societal marginalization that has occurred for the 400 years that my brown body has been in this continent. And I'm talking about after all the disastrous things we could talk about. Right? There are things in my own personal history that would make everybody in this room cry since 1970. I don't have to go back to slavery. I don't have to go back to lynching. I don't have to go back to the civil rights movement. I don't have to go back to deindustrialization. Right? We have created a system which marks children early because we have all been raised with this ridiculous idea that if we just distribute discipline across the board, it will turn those kids and lead to good outcomes. What I'm telling you directly is if I hadn't tripped into that goddamn vice principal's office in the 4th grade, there's no way in hell I would be sitting here in front of you. Right? So this is something we have to work through as a community. It is nobody here's fault that Ithaca, in particular Enfield, is 60 years behind the curve in terms of this concept of integrating schools. Right? There are schools that have gone through this half a century ago. In Boston, it led to street riots and a famous picture where a black man was actually beat severely with an American flag. And the picture won a Pulitzer. Right? So the issues you're raising, you may think that they're small in the context of Enfield, relatively small school, 200 students. How many children are actually causing problems there? A handful? What we're trying to work through now is an American problem. Right? So come and learn from us. Come and learn from these professionals here about how we've decided to deal with this structural issue. We may not have all the supports we need out there. Right? We have somebody sitting right next to you, hopefully can help us with the mental health care needs of the students as we see them continue to grow. But please, as you asked us not to call you racist, don't think we don't care about what's happening to the children there. Right? Don't think we're not paying attention. Don't think we're not looking at a bigger picture.
Sean, go ahead.
The pause is purposeful just so that I can let that sit for a minute. It's hard to follow Mr. Harris. So I'm going to change topics, then come back. The bathrooms at Ithaca High School have been a long-term concern. We've been trying to figure out how to do some work at the bathrooms, both the men's and the women's bathrooms, and even some of the work that I've been part of at Ithaca College is trying to think about how to have, for lack of a better word, all gender-inclusive bathrooms, and that may be a move that we have to consider a little more carefully as opposed to these sort of locker room styles. But I think Brad and Rob gave some response that I have found our facilities team to be extremely wanting in this area and respond pretty quickly. And so oftentimes I don't feel like they have the information, so we just have to do a better job of communicating. Doesn't mean we aren't going to continue to go through issues of difficulty. If you have 1,500 people using a bathroom, things are going to break. And so we got to just be on board. But I really appreciate bringing that. And we'll try to think about how to be more innovative in what those spaces look like as well. So that's one response. I also was not here last week. I missed that meeting, but I want folks to know the joy and the pleasure of having technology is while I was not in Ithaca, I watched the meeting. And so from start to finish, you would think, much to my wife's dismay, like, can't you take a night off? It didn't quite work that way. I wanted to make sure that I was listening to people and hearing what was being said, in large part to have some conversation with my colleagues and also with the administration team. And what I will echo with Mr. Harris is this is a topic like all of our schools that has great interest. We will do a better job of communicating what we're doing, but please don't think that there aren't significant concern about how to approach everybody's baby. What I'm very much aware of, the reason why I joined the school board, our child had graduated the year prior, but if you live in a community, then you are extremely interested in making sure that all people's children have a safe, engaging learning environment to go to. So we're having some difficult conversations. It doesn't happen overnight, as we know, but please, to the community and to other folks, rest assured that this is of great concern to be trying to provide that situation for all people's children. And so hopefully there'll be some follow-up with what that looks like in the next little bit. And multiple areas as we try to approach this, because it is a complex issue, and try to unwind that. So that's what I'll say for the time being.
Thanks, Sean. Anyone else right now?
I lied. My apologies.
About which? Sean.
About being done.
Go ahead, Sean.
I'm also working with Dr. Simons. This will be coming to the board policy committee momentarily. We're also going through and having an extensive review of our code of conduct for numerous reasons. There are policies on our code of conduct that have not been touched looked at or revised since 1974. They may be appropriate, they may not be, right? And so it also indicates to us that we have to sort of bring our code of conduct up with a 2018 frame of reference for our young people. And so there'll be more coming about what that code of conduct looks, in particular some community forums. It's mandated by law that, we don't make changes until the community has a chance to do that. So I hope when we get that out that people take a look at it and give us as much feedback as possible, how it may impact your child or what does it say about the work that we're trying to do here as well.
Those policies are great for when I graduated, I think at high, but I think we can probably update them. Anything else by the group? Greg? Pat, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to say to high school bathroom problems, again, long-standing, my daughter who's 34 says to me, haven't you fixed those bathrooms yet? Maybe by the time her son gets to high school, we keep going. To the Enfield parents, I recognize parents who were in the school on the Celebration of Learning last week that I came out, and other board members came out to see. Everyone on the board shares your concern that all children have a positive learning environment, and a harmonious learning environment where people respect each other, where kids respect each other, where kids are supported, and parents don't have to feel like they have to act as guardians in school to make sure their kids are safe. And that's that. I was in a situation like that many years ago. No parent wants to feel that way, and it's not necessarily anti somebody else's kid, but it's like I do not want my child to be having a negative school experience, and we share your concern. None of us want that. It's not something that school board members can wave a magic wand. It's not something that can be fixed immediately, but we are looking at it. We're talking about resources. Dr. Brown's is concerned, and he can address that as well, what he would like to say. But we are aware, we're concerned, and we're trying to be involved in finding a really positive solution. So know that we sincerely care. But it's a solution for every family in that school, hopefully.
Thanks, Pat. I want to follow up that certainly over the next few weeks, I look forward to those community conversations out at Enfield. I think that's critical. I think that's terribly important to bring the community together for the benefit of all the kids out in Enfield, and frankly all the kids wherever we are in the district. That conversation with the community, what's going on in the school, how can we help, how can we improve it, and that's and really what is going on within that geographic area and that elementary school out in the rural area. Frankly, we should have that conversation with all 8 elementary schools. We try to do that in a way at PTA meetings, but as we all show up at the various schools. But we need more. We need a bigger, larger group out at Enfield and bring a variety of stakeholders together. And I think I'm looking at Dr. Brown and other administrators. We're going to be working on that, but I think community also. What's good for you all? What give us some times, and but this can't wait. It has to be in the next few weeks, I would think. But I'll let I think Dr. Brown is probably going to speak to that in a few minutes. But appreciate folks coming to speak tonight. Anything else? Any other responses? Certainly, I enjoyed my trips out to Enfield last week. Great celebration of learning. First one at Enfield. Caroline's been doing it for a bit, but it's always great to, it's the kids worked really hard preparing for it. It was a great day. They're just the wax museum? Yeah, there was a wax museum, and the little kids reading in kindergarten. I was blown away by one little friend of mine who was talking about her. The subject was wood, and so she was reading through a book, and so it was great. Plywood is thin sheets of wood held together by glue. She's reading, going through, and cedar comes from cedar trees, and it's like, wait a minute, how old are you? And gonna be 6, and I'm as we mentioned, class of '74. So first grade, it was Dick and Jane and Spot, and I remember distinctly, see Spot run, and that was my read mode in first grade, and she certainly blew me away, and somehow. The kids just do great work, and she's Allison is a great student, I have to say. But so kudos to her and everybody out there, teachers, staff. It was a big, and the kids. It just was a great day to be at Enfield, and we want more. We want every day to be a great day at Enfield, and so I think that's what this board and the community. I think we're on the same page, and so that's our goal, and we're going to get there. But we're going to have to talk. So we'll do that. We'll do that soon. We do have some folks in the room. We do have an agenda, but there's no school, so we can be here as long as we want, Dr. Brown. Boynton's closed, so I can go play basketball at 9 o'clock. So I got nothing to do. So let's go on the consent agenda if we're good.
Move the consent as presented.
Second?
Way to jump in, Pat. Variety of items, Brad. I did see a lot of IPEI
A
grants.
list of IPEI grants, it's over $12,000. Thank you to our friends at IPEI for that. It's a list of projects
And multiple schools.
in multiple schools.
All right.
It's a seeker review there. We're actually deferring to the city. The Vivian seeker having to do with the realignment of the intersection of Elm and Chestnut. There's some land swap going on there, and a sidewalk along Aurora Street on the Southville School side of Aurora Street. Again, that's a city project, and we're deferring to them on the seeker.
The seeker also had Fall Creek listed as well. Did I read that wrong?
That's the land swap. The end of Lynn Street is what we're getting in exchange for the land
Gotcha.
up at Chestnut.
Chestnut.
We can't give things away, but we can swap them.
Yeah.
And the Bell Sherman property didn't work out or whatever. I mean, so it would determine. Yeah, there's different.
End of Lynn Street, down at Fall Creek. So that allowed us to do this because the Elm Chestnut rearrangement is taking a piece of land that belongs to the school district. So, I think those are the only ones to comment on.
Okay, good. Sean, questions?
And I would just assume that some on the HR report that some of those changes were discussed in the HR committee.
Chris?
Which changes?
Was the HR report discussed in committee? That's all I need to know.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Well, asked and answered. So, anything else for anything? So we're good? Ready to vote? All in favor? That is everyone, and we have everyone, and including Dr. Brown. So it's your turn, Dr. Brown.
Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Benjamin. And I'll be brief. 2 quick items. First, Wynton Marcellus was here on Friday, if you didn't hear already. We will be highlighting that in our ICSD Insider on our social feeds, but it was an outstanding couple of days for us. He spent time with our jazz band and a bunch of area high schools at Culp Auditorium on Friday, and he spent time at BJM on Saturday morning. So we have a lot of pictures, a lot of quotes. I had an opportunity to have dinner with him Saturday night, and it was for our community to have a legend like him here for that much time, and for him to engage with the young people on an individual and group level like he did was was amazing. So we will be capturing all the information from it. We'll be sharing those articles out for folks if you hadn't heard already, because we've been pretty excited about it. But I don't think everybody knows that Wynton Marsalis was here.
And you had dinner with him.
And I had dinner with him, and I learned a lot. We learned a lot from him. The second one, since I have Ms. Allen and Mr. Goodrich in the room, we are in the process of putting together those opportunities to engage the community. We are going to announce those hopefully next week. I'm trying to coordinate schedules. We're bringing in some third party. We're working with our BOCs, who's going to come in and help us help the community and staff and parents and all around DASA and what does DASA mean, how do we capture that information, what happens once we have trained everyone. So we'll be talking about DASA and what it means and what it looks like in a school district. We also, as part of the MBK grant, we had funds there allocated for parent engagement sessions. We will be kicking those off at Enfield Elementary in the near future. And we have a person we've identified finally who will be the point person for that. So some structured engagement opportunities for the community to come out and learn more about some of these issues and things we've been talking about in these meetings, but also as an opportunity for folks to just listen and learn from one another. But those sessions like this, reading a newspaper article, none of those can take the place of a one-on-one conversation. If you really want to know what we're thinking, what we want to do, and how we feel about it, respond to an email when I ask you for a meeting, and come in and talk to me. And I'll share everything we're thinking, what we plan on doing next week, the following week, next month, next year, and so forth. And also hear perspectives too. That's what we do. So this is not the best opportunity for you to find out what's happening. And quite frankly, you won't see anything happening much at a formalized board meeting unless you read the consent agenda, you study it, and you have a sense of it. But if you want to sit down and talk to somebody, we can talk about what we're doing. Thank you, Ms. Andy, for the opportunity.
Thanks, Dr. Ralph. So we'll move on, and we have delayed work session reports for a month, basically, because of our schedules, but we're going to just roll down through, and then we can get on to the presentations as BOCES and others are waiting for us. But if we could just, Ann, quickly, just go ahead and start.
Yes, we'll just go pretty quickly here. It is budget season in Albany, so we're watching that. We've been advocating for a lot of different issues, including continuing the resolution that we passed a couple weeks ago that, again, encourages BOCES construction to be excluded from the tax cap. So that was passed, and we'll be following that up with a letter. We've also been following up with our other concerns that NISBA's been really concerned about, which have to do with expense-based aids. So we've been advocating on those issues as well. So that's pretty much what we're working on at the moment.
Oh, very good. And, well, Brad, go ahead.
Sure. Facilities, I mean, we've been doing some of our usual review of different facilities, but we're also now gearing up for the next bond project. We expect to take a bond project to the voters a year from now, May of 2019. It'll be 12 years since the last one. So it's time to do that. There'll be life safety issues, maintenance issues, and learning spaces, contemporary learning spaces. So there'll be a number of different things in it, but we're gearing up for that at this point. We'll be bringing a plan forward to the voters a year from now, but in the meantime, I think we'll also have some discussions in different buildings about different opportunities.
Well, I guess there's a fair amount of work to do if we're going to do that
There's a fair amount of work to do,
all right.
but it's underway.
And bathrooms at the high school, I'm sure.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
so finance, Brad?
Sure, finance, obviously it's budget season. We had a great discussion at the last meeting with pre-K folks, special education, and BOCES.
Yeah.
So we had a busy meeting there. As you know, it's a year-round process of budgeting. We try and hear from all the different aspects of the budget at different times during the year, so that it's not done in a rush here at the end. Superintendent will be presenting his budget in 2 weeks.
2 weeks, yes,
In
sir.
2 weeks. We'll be within the tax cap, and that'll also likely mean that the tax rate will go down for the third year in a row. So look forward to bringing that forward in 2 weeks.
Echo the sentiment regarding the conversations at the last finance, the flow from special ed into pre-K, and it was really a great discussion. Chris, HR.
HR just wrapped up a 10-year presentation from the building leaders. We have finalized everyone that is coming up for 2018 and did anyone coming up early 2019, just so we look at all folks coming up twice. We will be transitioning into recruitment and retention. And as always, Dr. Simons is working on streamlining all of our daunting HR documentation. That's really it from HR.
Thanks, Chris. Curriculum.
So our last meeting was March 6th, and it was an unusual meeting because Liddy Coyle and Laura Evans were in Austin, Texas, and so we had a conference call at the meeting. And so what we've continued to do, which has been our focus this year, is working on the district inclusion plan, where we're trying very hard to make it clear with action steps and metrics to measure our progress. We also, at the last meeting, we looked at the professional development content map, which, as a former teacher, it really spoke to me because it visually represents the components of professional development, which are inclusion, culturally responsive practices, teaching and learning innovations, and professional responsibility and compliance. And this map, this chart, really enables teachers, staff, administrators to identify where their needs are and to plan a coherent approach to their own personal development. The next meeting is at a different time and day. It's going to be April 9th at 5:30 p.m. And what we're hoping to do is to get some brief updates or have some brief discussion on a number of things. Some we've talked about before, some are more recent. For instance, we're going to get an update on middle school math, which we talked a lot about in previous years. We're also going to be talking about a new mandate from New York State on a mental health component in the health curriculum. And recently, Ann and Eldred and I, we all had a rather white-knuckle trip to Long Island to go to the NYSBA-sponsored Mental Health Summit, which gave us
snow.
Yeah, right. It was white-knuckle because of snow. Yeah, right. And
Not your mental health or anything.
no, and so there was a lot that we took away from that conference that we're trying to figure out how we move forward. We also, something we've been talking about that definitely is related to curriculum committee that we want to talk about is, how we approach teaching about oppression and marginalization. So, next meeting, April 10th. It's a Thursday, right? Oh, it's a Monday. Yeah, Monday. Yes, right.
Because of the confusion. Yeah.
Right. 5:30. Yeah.
Thanks, Maura. And Sean, policy.
I need to read a little bit more about the etymology of white knuckle, but not sure that applies to Eldred. We'll keep that moving.
Well, no, they lighten up when you clench them.
The policy committee is trying its best to get through the entire policy book. It's not going to happen this year. It's been a 6-year endeavor. We are currently in the 5,000 series. In that 5,000 series includes the code of conduct, which also includes about 35 policies in and of itself. We're going through those. We just finished policies around communicable diseases and our school immunization policy. We're going to be doing some additional review about sort of our comprehensive attendance policy, student dismissal policy, as well as the code of conduct. And so we are hoping our best to get through the 5,000 series by the end of 2035.
He's not kidding.
Hopefully by the end of the school year is our plan. And so as I keep telling folks, we welcome participation, feedback, etc. All of our policies are posted on the course site. I'm in teaching mode. All of our policies are posted on the school district site, so please give us some feedback.
Is there a 9,000 series?
There is a 9,000 series.
Okay.
And a 6, 7,
And a
and
6,
8.
7, and
Yeah,
8,000.
I think I just got a headache. But thank you, everyone. It's great to get a quick update. And speaking of quick updates, our friends from BOCES are here just to do, well, we always welcome you on an annual basis, but glad to see you more often than that.
I did catch your word quick. We'll do our best.
No. We're trying to be quick to get to you.
Great. Well, it's good to see you all again. Jeff Madison, District Superintendent. Dave Parsons, our Assistant Superintendent for Management Services. We have David Barr, Director of Exceptional Education here with us. But while we're bringing up the slides, I figured I'd give you a little update, press update, information on the state budget and some of those issues that you brought up. Apparently, during negotiations Sunday evening, there was a moment where the negotiators on the executive side said he would accept all of the BOCES related proposals in exchange for them accepting his expense-based aid proposal. And what ended up happening is both sides dropped everything. So the only really policy-related item that's left, this is all from folks that we have across the street. You know, obviously, the last-minute thing that can happen, you know, before they announce, we don't know what will come out, but apparently that's all been dropped. Which doesn't mean, you know, that those bills that Senator Murphy has been carrying with the BOCES capital, the new one on the public voting, is gone. It just means it goes up into regular session. But it looks like the expense-based aid piece is pushed off. I saw your letter to Senator O'Mara, very good. It's great. You guys are wonderful advocates and really good communicators when it comes to those folks. I think it does make an impact. Speaking of that, you may recall last year the state aid to municipalities grant that was going to go toward assisting our region for some capital work up at the BOCES. We received word the other day that it's in the Dormitory Authority's final stage of approval before it goes to the Division of Budget. That could be quick, it could be long, I don't know, but it's been through 18 stages so far, but it's still moving. It's been 9 months, but it looks like that is going to happen. I was going to give you guys
Fast by SED standards.
Fast by state standards, but and you also may have caught too in the federal budget approval that Title II actually got an increase, so Title IV Perkins grant that affects us had an increase. We don't know what the allocations are by district, but the worst did not happen. You know, I think election year politics had something to do with that. I would keep my eye on the ball on that. I know you folks have been advocating with Congressman Reed on that issue too, but I want to make sure you were aware of that issue as well. So I guess now we'll move on to our business with the BOCES program and administrative budget. Appreciated the opportunity. I would have been there for our folks to come to your finance committee meeting to have an opportunity to go through this before. First slide. So they had a little time to informally weigh on some things. You can see this is you. You are the top number, resident weighted average daily attendance. That's your enrollment, but it's a lag enrollment. It's not like what it is right now, but that's what the state uses for your BOCES aid. You can see that's a total for our TST BOCES region. You have just under 42% of all the students in the region. Your aid ratio is 40.5%. Currently, as of December, your numbers in CTE were 121. There's a question in the finance committee meeting to talk about that increase, because you can see that your 3-year rolling average is rising.
And thank you for the data.
Yeah, so
It's broad. It's not in
right.
It isn't in a single. I was curious as to whether it was in a single program or something like that.
I can remember off the top.
Yeah. Well, now I see why. It's
all over the place.
It's all over the place. It's culinary, digital media, heavy equipment, all sorts of
really only
categories.
3 of the programs your students are not participating at higher levels than 2 years ago. So.
Yeah.
lots of increased participation, and definitely with our more technical related programs where students have an increasing interest in. But you have those numbers in front of you now.
That's
So,
great.
great question, and I hope, and you can see it's 115 now, so it fluctuates during the year. That was a December number, the 121, it's 115 now.
Jeff, can I ask just a quick question
Yes, sir.
on this chart? So the numbers on the bottom, are obviously the totals, you just
Correct.
mentioned 115.
Right.
What are the numbers right above that?
Right above
World of
it,
Work.
that is the World of Work program number.
Oh, that's just another
Okay, that's
program
just a
number.
program. You see, New
Okay.
Visions Engineering was blank, so we didn't have that until this year, so that's a brand new program. You have 2 students.
We have 2 students.
Correct. And same with sports and fitness, you have 2, and we only have the first year, because that
Right.
is the first year.
Since we're on that chart,
Sure.
I know it's not that chart, but this chart's in the New Visions Engineering, I have 2 questions. One is that a program you're hoping to build, and like what does it include? And my second thing here, the one thing I don't see in here are sort of like woodworking, construction kind of skills. I was wondering if that's ever
Our
something we want
construction
to.
trades closed 3 years ago for lack of enrollment.
So no interest in.
I'm sure there's a few students interested in the region, it's just the expense of keeping that open for 3 students annually was, we were not able to do it, we can't afford it. No one could afford those tuitions to keep that running. It's shocking to us, sad to us to see a program like that go away. We've renovated that space, and that's how we were able to grow the regional alternative school, which is, that's gone from when it was down here at the community school in the 60s, it's up to over 100 students in that program. Partly because we have the space for it on our campus, and those students now are accessing career and tech like they had never been able to before. We used to have to bust them up for career and tech and that. So
But the engineering then, is that what?
engineering is actually housed at Cornell. So it's a cooperative with us and Cornell. We provide the teacher, they provide everything else. And it's full. We expect it to remain full. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback. I think it's one of our best teachers at BOCES, David Syracuse, who is running that program. And we anticipate that being a smashing success moving forward.
Life sciences also at Cornell.
Oh,
And
The health is up at
is
the
Hugo Medical.
Medical.
And of course, the complaint throughout the communities is there's no one that knows how to put up, drywall. No one knows how to do construction trades. There's a lack of supply for contractors, for skilled carpenters, plumbers, electricians. But there's just no demand. I mean, you can't force demand. I mean, that's the way you've always done, is created opportunities. And one of the backbones, seemingly, of programs in the past. You still have the auto
Welding is very
body, auto
popular,
tech.
auto body, auto
Right,
tech are still very popular.
Well, that's good. Right.
So, there's your numbers.
It really is a shame that you didn't know.
what the trends were. And you can see your,
Can I ask
Yes, sir.
one tiny other question about what Rob just mentioned, carpentry? We're still learning about this. Do you market just to the student population to procure demand, or are there deeper relationships that you guys have which also failed to produce, like communication with unions, or any apprenticeship programs out there? I'm just trying to figure out. We can't square the circle on how the need, how the supply and demand is so off.
right,
Yeah, we did talk with the local unions.
but, because not only that, we had an advisory council that meets twice a year around each and every program we have. So, and those are the people who are supposed to be plugged into that network, is getting student input, and what we were offering at the time up there. And now, we have a different way we're marketing things to students. These Technopalooza in the summer for students who are middle school level. All of our teachers are taking a week during the summer and running camps now that we didn't have. And we think that may be generating more interest, why our programs are getting full. So we've learned our lesson on some of those things. We need to monitor this a little closer and get to more kids and give them some experiences so they know what it is before they come to our campus. Waiting until they're a junior in high school is way too late. We think Diane's work at trying to sell this, each and every one of these trades to our students is beginning to pay off. So we will see moving forward what happens.
Oh, great, thanks.
Great questions. So you can see, the reason we have fractions of students, special ed, and alt ed is because they're billed by student in, student on daily rates. They're not like you got a spot September to June. So you can see about 230 students come to our campus on a daily basis, and that doesn't count your summer school where you send as many students as well. You can see your current contract amount, and you're about 33% of our business. So you're 42% of our size, but 33% of that's kind of normal for a larger school district in a BOCES, that there's many things they don't need to share that some of the smaller schools do need to share. You'll see small schools will purchase greater than their size, larger schools will purchase smaller than their size. It's kind of a normal thing to us. There's nothing, no real outlier there as far as we're concerned business-wise.
There's a program like itinerants that do we participate in at all?
You do have, I think, some music itinerants.
Music, but not significant.
And what else?
E&M.
And E&L, right. So we do some sharing, but then when you get big enough to have full-time, then you take it back for yourself, so that's how that works. Next slide. So this is our program budget, and this is after the initial request of services. Final requests just came in and were certified like within the last week, so this will be modified for a final budget. In fact, if you ever looked at our meetings monthly, our budget changes every month because the program is more like a business. People purchase, people get in, people get out of certain programs and services. And you can see our growth is in career and tech, our growth is in exceptional education, and instructional services has taken a pretty big jump. Instructional support is up a little bit. Some of the non-instructional, even though it's showing it's going down, I think our final numbers will show that that has grown. One of the reasons is this Navigate Prepared software program. I think we now have 17 customers around the state, including our own BOCES region, to get that software package to support our school districts for their notifications and their storing their safety plans and such. So that will be adjusted. But that's just to give you an idea of where our growth is and what where those numbers are as far as the amount of business we're doing in each of those areas.
Dr. Madison, what's the name of that program again?
Navigate Prepared.
That's right.
Yeah. Next slide. Our total budget, the change is up about 5.33%. Probably a little over 2% of that is increasing just salaries and benefits, and the other 3% is increases in business. You can see a total budget up about $2.4 million. That doesn't mean it's all coming to you. Remember, we have several other customers and customers from other school districts around the state. That's the total amount of business that's coming in out of BOCES. And again, those three areas that are growing, and the one that is decreasing was cross contracts, which that means we're providing the service instead of purchasing from other BOCES. And you can see we facilitated about $1.8 million worth of grants this year. That will take a big jump after this year from a large grant that the region received that's a total of about $3 million over 7 years that we're not allowed to talk about publicly, so let the record show I did not say anything about that grant publicly until the executive gets a chance to announce those. We also facilitate grants for our component districts. Dave?
As with all of our budgets, the salary and fringe drives 3/4 or more of our budgets. So our contracts at this point are all settled. So we're looking at about a 2.3 or 2.93% increase in their salary lines, which represents just a little over 1% of our budget. Health insurance, that's for next year, we're looking at 7%. Represents just a little under 1% of our total budget increase. So between the two, you're looking at about 2% wrapped in those two particular lines.
You know, we had a conversation at the finance committee with you about we really would like you to be looking at changing your retiree health insurance. We've made a change, it's substantial savings, it's available to you, you should be looking at it as well.
Appreciate that. We've had conversations and been running some numbers in the past week. We have to look at that a little bit closer. Some of it doesn't work depending on the retiree because of the contract they retired under. And some of the things work for us because we have more and more retirees that have retired under the contractual provision where they're locked in, BOCES is locked into just our cash amount the day they retire, and the retiree pays any increase in the future, which when they become Medicare eligible, often makes them go out on their own and find their own supplemental.
They don't, so they just drop it entirely.
We do have them start to drop it entirely. So we're doing more analysis on that, but really appreciate you putting us onto that. It's worth us looking at it and looking at those numbers.
Retirement for next year, the ERS and TRS rates have been established. So they are going up. The good thing is they've had a little bit better return than they expected. So we're hoping that maybe the following year we won't see another increase. But it is going up for next year. It's already planned. Represents about 0.22% of our increase in our budget. And the other small pieces to the dental and so on and so forth, which is, like I say, a small 0.09% of our total budget increase. Our capital budget is actually made up of two pieces. One is the energy performance contract that we did about 8 years ago. We make a lease payment on that every year, about $286,000. The other part of that is the rent that the adult ed actually reimburses this budget for. But it has to be in this budget for budgeting purposes. So the adult ed actually writes a check to reimburse that piece out of here. So what the districts actually pay is only for the EPC. It's about $286,000 of this $317,000.
I imagine that's changing year by year, your EPC payments?
No, they're locked for 12 and a half years.
So,
Yeah, we actually shortened that. We could have gone 18 and we got it to so that it would break even at 12 and a half. So we'll be out of it in another 6, I think it is, total.
And 2 years ago, we did have a controller's audit on the EPC. And they don't like EPCs at the controller's office. When they came in to check ours, we actually are making a lot more money than we anticipated.
through the energy savings?
Through the energy savings, so that was a finding in that audit. So they didn't publicize that as loud as they publicized the ones that.
No screaming on that one.
It was a wise decision, it went very well.
Yeah. We actually did two parts of that. We did an initial and then we did an addendum about 2 years later and added another little piece to it. Yeah. Reserve accounts, we actually cannot have an unappropriated fund balance, so at the end of every year, whatever's left over goes back and refunds to our districts in the same fashion that we charged that particular COSA or whatever the expenses were. So we have to start over every year with those. The reserves that we can have, and these are our audited numbers from last June, we do not have a capital reserve. In order to do that, you've got to have SED project numbers. So we recently got the number for the project that we're looking at, but we can't start funding it until we know where we're going with that. We are self-insured for unemployment. So if somebody draws unemployment, the state pays them, they send us a bill, we send them the money. So we're self-funded with that. The insurance is, our dental insurance is self-funded also, so we keep a reserve for that. The CTE reserve at that particular point did not have anything in it. We are planning on starting to fund that this year, and that's done through depreciation of the equipment that's in the CTE program. You depreciate it over 10 years, and the theory behind that is if you depreciate it, you don't have to increase your budget when it comes time to buy those big pieces of equipment, car lifts, paint booths, so on and so forth, that are big chunks. So we're trying to fund that through the depreciation and then pay for things as they come instead of hitting the budget. Our ERS retirement reserve is currently at $1 million. Our policy says we can go up to 1.5 times. That's just about our 1 year mark there. We did talk to I mentioned this last week. We talked to one of the fellows from the comptroller's office that he wouldn't actually say it on the record, but he said 2 to 3 times your annual is okay. So what we're trying to do with that one is we know that at some point the rates are going to go the other way. They're going to climb. To try to even those out. So we're always trying to flatten our budgets as much as possible. Our administrative budget is the one that you folks vote on, just like the public votes on your budget. So we'll spend a little time with this one. But the one that we do want to talk about is the retiree benefits, the line 841. Anyone that retires from BOCES, and it doesn't matter what department they come from, that's where their retirement benefits have to be paid out of by law. So that's the one that we always keep an eye on, try to to make sure that it's not getting out of line and watching it continuously. My counterparts in the other parts of the state are wrestling with 70 and 80% of their budget is in that line. So we're, if you can call it fortunate, we're not in that ballpark. But a lot of that has come from prior negotiations to try to hold those benefits and not give away the farm as it's been going. So the other parts of that represents about 2.5% of this whole budget increase. The rest of it is what Dr. Madison and I actually can control. So it's a very small piece of that. So that in itself represents about 3.67% increase in the administrative budget. The income, investment revenue, and miscellaneous, I've left those alone for years. I don't see those changing one way or the other, so I've left them alone for years. It's a number to budget for just in case. So with that, we're looking at about a 3.75% in our administrative increase in our budget. Any questions with that one?
So either for us or folks across the state, is it common that our retiree benefits are more than our current salary line?
Yeah, some of my counterparts are looking at 60-70% of that whole budget is in that line.
In the retiree line.
Yeah.
Law of numbers, I mean, there's more retirees than current employees.
I don't get 11 salaries in
Right.
in this portion of the budget.
Correct.
Right.
Correct. Yeah.
And those benefits, again, they are really the health care benefits,
Health
right?
and dental.
Health and dental.
Really, the only growth in that has been new retirees, because our percentage of the total has been going down annually about 1% because of some of the negotiations 10 years ago. Before our time, we take no credit for that. And we've just held the line on that. So the problem when you grow and you have more programs is you end up with more liabilities too in the end. So controlling the number of retirees is going to be a challenge moving forward. So we'll just keep you updated and always let you know how many retirees we're having, just so you can track why that line is growing the way it does.
Right, we just try to make the distinction for folks watching, pension benefits are separate. That's not what that line is.
Your school budget is somewhere different, but by state law, ours has to be in that administrative budget.
It's just an anomaly of what they asked for, and it's kind of an odd place to put it.
Right. Right. And I think the theory behind that is if a district is in a COSR, for instance, and that person retires, and then that district is not participating in that COSR anymore, it has to be paid from somewheres. So it's not fair for the other districts that are still left in that COSR to pick up all the retirement costs when that person really was working for another district. So I think that was really the theory of putting it in the administrative budget. It's divided equally by size, and so it's what we live with. By law, our vote has to be somewhere between April 16th and the 30th. So this year, it will be on April 18th. So you'll vote on actually two different things. One is the budget we just looked at, and the other is the 3 board members that are up for our TST BOCES Board of Ed from Groton, Lansing, and Newfield. Any questions?
Right, you're at the end of your presentation, so any other, we like to ask questions as we go along, as you do. Anything else for the good folks? We good? Thank you, Dr. Madison.
Good to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
You're welcome.
So on the agenda at this point is something that's typically not on the agenda, and we haven't done it in quite a while, but the district, the board encouraged the administration to sponsor a demographic study. Because Brad, you mentioned something about a bond referendum coming up, and for a variety of reasons, we wanted to do a demographic study. What does this district look like? What does the community look like in a few years? So if that's an introduction, we'll go with that.
Thank you, Chairman Ainsley, members of the board, Dr. Brown. Thank you for the opportunity to present here and be with you tonight. As Chairman Ainsley said, my role here tonight is to give you an overview of the demographic study that we have completed and an overview of the process and ultimately our findings. There's a lot of content in this presentation, and I'm going to just go through, touch on some of the highlights of the contents on the slides, but there's information in here that we may need to go back to if there's any questions, to help facilitate any questions and discussion.
It's 76 pages long, is that basically, right?
Yes, I'm not going to, there's about 30 in the back end, just in case there's questions about the school level.
There you go.
Forecast. So just a little bit about who we are. We are Cropper GIS Consulting. We are based out of Ohio. Our offices are in Dublin, Delaware, Ohio. But we specialize in K-12 planning, do demographic studies like we're doing here. We do population enrollment forecasting and also a lot of school redistricting and facility planning work. I am Matthew Cropper with the president of the company, and I've worked on projects like this all over the United States, over 15 years of experience in doing this type of work in addition to other type of work across the United States. Dr. McKibben is our demographer who works with us, and he is one of the best in the business at small area forecasting. He's a PhD demographer. He has some of his education is actually from the New York area. He went to Geneseo. And so he has a lot of experience across the United States, but his specialty is really small area forecasting and population forecasting, and he's very accurate in the work that we've done in the past and going back and looking at it. So honored to be working with him on this. We work with districts from 2,000 to 200,000 students, mostly public school districts. We've done some work with privates, and we also do work in the federal theater as well. I do work with the U.S. Department of Justice, the Office of Civil Rights, and provide consultation on federal desegregation cases that are still actively working their way out. So we've got a lot of experience in working with districts and what has worked and what hasn't worked, and also different dynamics and communities and as it relates to the demographics. So we are here because we're hired by the district to develop do a population study for your district. We do a full population study, which ends up in a population forecast, and that drives an enrollment forecast. It's a little bit different than what you may have seen in the past of using just a historical enrollment trends and trend lining those forward in a process that you may have heard as cohort survival method. This is a cohort component method, which is much more scientific based, that the population forecast drives the enrollment. So to analyze the population and the enrollment and then ultimately develop a 10-year forecast by school by grade for the district. So a little bit about the data and information that we had collected. We collected information from a variety of sources. The school district gave us information on historical enrollment. We also obtained your student database so that we can map out the students and understand where all the students live in the district versus attend schools, and the mobility that occurs and how many students live in an area that may not go to school there, and those type of dynamics. The county was, and the city and also the town were very helpful in providing us information on mapping data, where the property lines and addresses and all of that. But in addition to that, a lot of extensive information was provided by the different organizations on housing, past housing and future housing, so they were really helpful. IRS is useful for migration data, and then the census data gives us a good foundation as a base to look at in terms of population. One of the things that we do, and once we take your student database and map out your students, is we develop something called a matrix, a Live 10 matrix. And if you could scroll up just a little bit to the bottom. So this basically shows us the number of students, how many students live inside each of your attendance zones for your elementaries. And then this shows us how many students attend the schools that we have mapped out for for the database. You can see there are private schools included in here, so we had a really good handle on where the private students live and what parts they live in the district. And this helps us really understand, if you look at the green lines, these are the number of students that live inside the attendance area that go to their home school. But anything outside of this represents students that live in an area that attend a school outside. So for instance, 21 students live in the BJM zone. They attend Bell Sherman Elementary. And this helps us correlate census data, census statistics to your actual enrollment and looking at the mobility that exists within the district. So we did this as well for your middle school, so we can see the middle school, the mobility and where the students are living versus attending in your middle schools as well. And then we also did it for high school. We typically don't put this in for high school, but we did for this one because we had a lot of good data. In the state of New York, you have a lot of good information on private school enrollment that we can map out. So this kind of gives you an idea on students by private schools and how many students are attending private schools and things like that. You've probably seen some of this data in other reports.
I have a question. Can you go back to the first slide that you just showed us, the one right before this?
This one or the elementary schools?
You want elementary?
The one on elementary school.
Elementary schools?
Yeah.
Got it.
There are numbers right after the text. The second column has numbers. What do those numbers mean?
Okay, so these represent the enrollment of the school. So this is where students attend. So this represents the 347 are enrolled in Bell Sherman, 257 live in Bell Sherman, K through 5th grade.
All right, then all the way on the other end, the live out, attend, what are those numbers?
These represent, this is a sum of these, of everything that's not in green. So this represents the number of students that live outside of Bell Sherman that attend Bell Sherman. And then likewise, we're looking at numbers that are coming into Bell Sherman zone, but we're also looking at the number of students that live in the Bell Sherman zone that attend out to other schools as well. One thing to note with this is that these do include some private school enrollments too, so it's not just your public schools. But that's how you would interpret that table.
But just to clarify, so the live out, attend in they're basically kids who live somewhere in the Ithaca City School District, the vast majority of them, and they're open enrolling in Bell Sherman. So there's 257 Bell Sherman age kids within the district of that school, but there's 347 attending that school, and it's because 129 kids from other schools move in, and then about 39 kids go someplace else.
Yes, ma'am.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
That's correct. This helps us understand, because there's a big difference if you look at just Bell Sherman, for example, the 257 living in the zone versus 347 attending. The live-in counts help us correlate the census data, so we look at school-age kids by that age cohort to try to correlate the public to private and different things like that.
You're using the word correlate, but when thinking about this, I'm thinking about an aggregate number, because what you're showing here now is much as an indication of how we zone, more so than demographic shifts, from my perspective.
That's right. This is not, this gives us an idea of the mobility and the transience that occurs due to open enrollment and other programs and offerings that you have in the district. This kind of gives us an idea on how enrollment of a school, because we look at historical enrollment of your buildings for the last 5 years, but that may not correlate to how many kids live inside the attendance area. So we're trying to, so this helps us look at your enrollment, study your enrollment trends, but also look at the total number of students that live in a zone so that we can compare that to some other data sets.
So then where's the aggregate district number? Because that would be one I would want to see.
The total number of live out
the school district, yeah.
we don't put a sum total together, but we can certainly do that. We can
For me, I think that would be as
Certainly.
helpful as the individual school one, which is much more based on boundaries, and that could be changed by a policy shift.
It certainly
Whereas that
can.
other number, if the board wouldn't have as much flexibility as far as changing that number.
Yes, sir, yes, and this is analysis of your attendance areas and the number of students that live in and attend within your attendance boundaries, and that can change based on changes to boundaries and changes to programs and things like that. This is a point in time, this is using your 18 student database that analyzes this.
We do get there by the end, though, right? In other words, there is a population projection, maybe the wrong choice of words, about what we expect our total enrollment to do over the next 10 years, right? So there is some sort of number about how many students we expect to either increase or decrease.
Right, I thought we saw that.
Yes, sir. There is the end of this all. The end result is a forecast of your enrollment that says, assuming that you have the same levels of mobility that we see here, using some of those carrying those assumptions forward, this is what your enrollment will do. And so this forecast is a demographic-based forecast that isolates non-demographic factors. And if you make changes to programs, if you add a program to a school, or say you expand a pre-K program at a school or take one away, that's going to impact our forecast because that's something non-demographic that we wouldn't have anticipated. But I can look at its total.
It would just be helpful on one of these charts here to have
Sure.
that aggregate number.
Okay.
And a little legend on these sheets about what the green numbers mean would be great too.
The green represents the students that live and attend, that live in the zone and go to their home school.
Right.
Just needs a key. Okay.
Just have to, you had to ask the question, right, but, yeah.
Sure. Okay. Okay. So we've also analyzed, extensively looked at the migration and housing data. The IRS gives us a good idea on reported the exemptions and how many people are moving into the area and region, and what's some composition demographics of that population, such as persons per household, the mean household income. So we look at how many people are coming in and where they're coming from, and then how many people are leaving. And the net is really what is what we focus on, is what is the net migration. This is the IRS data is only at the county level, and you're not a county-based system, so we have to take this, use this, be careful with this because it's not a direct comparison to your district, but the majority of the county is within. Ithaca represents the majority of Tompkins County, so this has been useful for us to see a net migration data set from the IRS. And then we can see your net migration in the county has been negative. So if you look at the number of people that have come in and the number of people that have left over the last since 2012, it has been a net out-migration. And so that's something that we have observed in this data set. We also had, the city provided a lot of data on building permit data, historical building permits that have been issued. We were able to take that building permit information and aggregate that to your attendance zone so that we could study how many permits have been issued by zone over the course of the data set that they provided.
I do have a question on this slide. I was looking at this earlier today. That says the city of Ithaca building permits by elementary zone, but then the chart says single-family home units for sale, which is sort of different. And it confused me because building permits get given for all kinds of purposes. If you're, doing your roof, you need a permit. So I'm just wondering what the connection between the title of this slide and what it stems from.
Okay, well that's a great question, and we always filter out the permits for decks and pools and those types of things. You need a building permit for any type of building improvement typically. Those are not included in these. These are only new residential
When you do your final draft of this, it would be really helpful to actually say that, because it is confusing. And also, when I look at that, I think, God, that's kind of remarkable. Between 2006 and 2017, no permits for new house construction in anywhere except Fall Creek, and I'm just,
Well, one of the problems is half of Cuba Heights is not in the city of Ithaca. So you asked the question of the wrong authority.
Right, we did reach out to the town,
And then there's towns,
planners and talk with them
But
as well.
that's a village. That's yet another
village,
That's yet
village.
another.
it's New York State.
Yeah, welcome to New York.
I know there's a lot of different municipalities and things, but we look at a lot of, when we look at building data, we try to look at as many sources of data as possible. The city has been one source, but we also get census building permit data for the area. We try to reach out to the other agencies, and then we also use other sources such as Zillow, which gives us a really good understanding of homes that have been sold over the last 3.5 years, and so that data covers the entire. That's not limited to municipal boundaries.
Right, but just so that I'm understanding this, so what this is saying is that in Bell Sherman Elementary Zone, which is both uptown and downtown, right, south side, that not a single family home unit has been for sale between 2006 and 2007?
No, a new built.
A new build.
But
Exactly.
that's not accurate
It's not
because of
accurate.
that whole
neighborhood.
But it's
neighborhood
not
on
in the
Mitchell
city,
Street.
it's not in, is it
Is it in
in
the town also?
It's in the town.
It's
So-
outside.
Right.
You're
but-
right, it's just outside the limits.
No, but I
Right.
mean, that's what I read from your, that's how I interpret your chart. Am I interpreting the
These are
chart
for,
correctly?
these don't represent existing home sales. These only represent new home construction, building permits for new home construction.
It is not accurate because I'm in the South Hill School District and there have been several dozen homes built between 2006 and 2017.
But are
Quite
they in the
sizable
town?
expense. They're in the town.
Not
So,
the
so
city.
just going to the city doesn't give a sense of how South Hill is going to,
Right.
has grown in that area.
Right, and we have, and so I feel like, this is one piece of data that we have studied. We have looked at other data sets and also studied your enrollment history and census data and things like that to see what should have happened. So we are monitoring and have tracked the impact of residential activity on student enrollment. One of our takeaways with this district is that, and it's very common for districts to do this, is to think about new construction and think about new construction being the primary driver for change in a district for enrollment. If you see new homes being built, that's going to be what's going to add students to your district. But a much more dominant trend in districts such as this is the existing home turnover. You've had about 1,400 homes bought and sold in the last 3.5 years. And so there's a lot more going on with the churn of existing homes. That's a much more dominant factor that's affecting enrollment change than just new home construction.
No, but I would still argue that there's a huge difference between like one new unit and say 51 new units, or 61 or 71, which is more like what has happened in the town of Ithaca. As far as South Hill, there have been several fairly substantial developments in the past decade that just don't show up on your chart.
Sean's first. He was definitely before me.
Chris, then.
I was just curious how we fall within the housing turnover. Are we average, above average?
I think that you have your existing home market is a healthy market. I would say that you have about 400 to 500 homes being bought and sold every year based on the data that we've seen, and I think that's a representative of a healthy market. I do think that the market is starting to slow because of interest rates are rising, so we're probably going to see existing home sales slow down a little bit than what they have in the past 4 years. but I would say that that you definitely have a robust housing market, and that's attributable also to, or that can be seen in your enrollment. Your enrollment is fairly stable, and it's forecasted to remain stable. And a lot of other districts that we're doing this type of work for, we're having to tell stories of enrollment declines and much sharper declines. And I think that the fact that your housing market is as healthy as it is what's keeping your enrollment stable and keeping it from declining.
Right, and upstate New York, especially Eldred, go ahead.
So in between those two parameters you just mentioned, existing homes and new homes, exists this phenomenon we're seeing here with these large multi-unit developments. And they're all taking place in the areas in our community in which developers have made the decision they can build there because of the prices and actually get a return. Are those represented on this sheet? And to the extent that they are, do you have the capacity to project based on these kinds of maps of where developers might continue to go, right? So for example, Enfield looks small now. I can almost guarantee you in 10 years, it's gonna look a hell of a lot less rural, right? Because that's where people can afford to build these. And I don't know how many of these units in Overlook or in these other places we have, but these are pretty substantial entities.
We do something that we refer to sometimes as a subdivision yield study and a build-out scenario, looking at the impact of future growth and how many students you're going to yield out of future growth at future housing units. We typically do that kind of work in a district that has where they're heavier on new construction than existing home turnover, and we do that kind of work with a lot of suburban districts that started off as a farm field 10 years ago, and now there's new subdivision. Every subdivision is less than 10 years old, and that kind of work it's more applicable to a district like that. A district like this where you don't have a whole lot of new home construction. You do have a lot of construction going on, but most of the construction that we found that's occurred over the last 10 years and such has been geared more to the college population for student housing and things, and that's not yielding many students. I wouldn't recommend a build-out study for a district like this unless you start to see some substantial several hundred unit developments starting to pop up here and there, which I don't feel that's unlikely that's going to occur just because there's not a demand in the area for that, unless something happens that brings population into this area, such as, say, for instance, Amazon says they're going to put their outpost here. That's going to bring in a substantial amount of population, or the university's going to double in size, or so a corporation moves in. That's the thing that's going to drive population migration, which will create a demand for housing.
But we are the only game in town where population is growing, right? Hopefully your studies show that. The rest of the communities around us are bleeding people. We're growing like wildfire, and our occupancy rate downtown.
We're growing, but it's not as drastic as the last census data. Put us at a couple thousand more, as opposed to 10,000 students more, or 10,000 people
Within
more.
the school district boundary.
Within the county.
In the county.
The population here is changing. It's growing, but it's also changing. It's aging, and so like as it relates to school enrollment, you have to factor that in. You have population that's growing and things like that, but your older sector population is what's growing faster, and that's resulting in fewer students in the district in certain areas and things like that.
Become a retiree community. That'd be interesting. LMI stands for
low moderate income units.
Gotcha.
Is what.
Yep.
Yes, sir.
Right.
So I wonder if something like you're saying, Pat, if the South Hill, some of the developments I saw in South Hill may be captured in that 11, right? So there's 3 or 4 units right out of Ithaca College, but they're multi-bedroom units strictly for students.
But I would also argue they're not in the city.
Well, the
Yeah.
ones I'm talking about are
Oh,
in the
they
city.
But then you
Because
get,
right
Oh,
below
those-
South Hill School.
Oh, those
Right.
pod things they
Yeah.
put in, those.
Or the 650 that's being talked about in Bell Sherman, is that the Maplewood project that we're talking about, right? So it's built housing, but it's not necessarily geared towards sale, it's geared towards rent or free.
It is geared towards rental, but that enormous Maplewood thing is graduate
Grad
student,
students,
and they were also gonna put in some faculty housing there,
Mm-hmm.
because faculty have an affordability issue too.
Right, and that's not, that 565 under market units for rent in the Bell Sherman zone, is that including Maplewood or?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
That's the city. Maplewood is actually in the town.
Yeah,
And the town planner gave us some intel on Maplewood as well. It's primarily, it's geared to a grad student population. And I think I had the next slide, I think I have,
yeah, there you go.
It's,
well, that's something, this is basically the prior table. This is not only the historical, but this also shows approved units, and then we have it broken down by the number of units that have been approved. So this not only shows us where the historical units have been constructed, which you can see the majority of them have been around the college area in here, but then there's also one that that talks about future projects.
yeah, it's the next, 2 more slides. Pat.
Yes. And so this is some intel that we got from the town. The Maplewood development is primarily for college grad students, but 90 family units and 80 single units. So this would be the units that could yield children. These are more smaller units for just a single grad student designed for that. They said the total number is now 474. So right here you can see this is 170. So they're ramping it up. But and that's notable. But although it's a large number of units, it's primarily geared toward grad students that don't have many kids. So we don't anticipate this yielding many students. It was factored into the forecast and looking at it. But if this were, say, a large multi-unit development like a rental property that's not aimed to college students, you'd probably see more students coming out of a development like that.
So when making the forecasting for housing, do you take into consideration how many people are living underneath the poverty line in terms of how many single mothers or fathers or grandmothers are taking care of kids and they wouldn't be able to afford a 2-bedroom and they might be in a single unit?
We do, we look at yields and look at developments and how developments are yielding. And so we do see cases where you have families in a smaller single unit type development, and that does occur. And it's not as common, and so it's we look at all factors, and so that is something that exists, but it's not as much of a norm as what a normal household with kids is going to be in an apartment unit or a house that has more than one bedroom typically.
Can you define what you mean by normal household?
I'd say like a typical, the average household. When you look at housing and families inside this community, and you look at the mean or what the average family and their housing setting. That's what I mean by that. It's a typical type of family unit.
Were you saying mother, father, one child?
1.75 kids or whatever.
Right. Yes.
I think that's what Nicole's asking.
Yes.
What does that look like? That's according to what you base your numbers on.
Well, we look at all kinds of factors. We look at if you look at and I have some statistics that break down the demographics of household size, median age, numbers of renters, and households with children under 18, and we look at all of those statistics to try to understand how the different attendance areas are the demographics of each attendance area, and then how that's going to impact enrollment. But it's not to say that there wouldn't be any families in a quote-unquote single unit. But the way that they're building that development, that's not what their intent is with the single units. It's more for a grad student who's in town to do college and get their education here without a student without a family.
We're not building low-income housing.
Well, I did try to have that conversation before, talking about affordability, right, and the fact that we seem to be pushing folks outside the city center, and what's that going to mean for our population, both in terms of schools, city proper, and schools outside the city. So that was something we've asked folks to look at as well.
They also mentioned that there was a 105-unit townhome located on West Hill near the hospital. And this is aimed to be an affordable property, and it plans to offer tax subsidies. It's pending for approval right now, which is expected to be approved in May. And they said that the town planner said it's anticipated to occur in 2 phases, with 60 units in the first phase and then the remaining in the second phase. So it's still kind of speculative at this point. It's not a certain platted and approved plan. So it's something that's on our radar, but something that still isn't 100% certain that it will occur. And she mentioned that there were 2 other mixed-use communities that are in the planning phases within the town, and they're in early phases. And there's an undetermined amount of units and things like that. So these are more out there, more of a more speculative, and not something that we lean heavily on, just because they're not. We like to plan based on things that we know and things that are certain, as opposed to things that are planned. Because sometimes there can be a planned development, and it'll stay idle for 10 years, and nothing will be built for 10 years. And so we don't want to overestimate with things like that.
And what you're basically is really speaking to is a few developments almost on the margin. For when you're looking at a demographic study, as you mentioned before, you're looking for that large event. Northern Virginia, where they've just keep building and building, and they just keep going out. Planned communities coming in, and what we're going to have to build another school here, or right. I mean that happens.
Absolutely.
You're really talking population on a margin here. I mean a few more families, or a number of kids. They're in the city of Ithaca. There's very, very few unbuilt housing lots, right? And so you can't build here. So and really to move the needle, we need large developments, single-family homes, or large developments where there's going to be a family moving in for a reason, and you're really not seeing that push in this area. We are a university and college town. We're very stable for upstate New York. We are one of the green spots in upstate New York, but that does not mean we're growing dramatically. Is that what?
That's correct.
All right.
Yes, sir.
Just to help you move along.
Thank you.
Just, well, I mean, no, I mean, but you, right. Right. No, I mean, but, well, you've been talking for half an hour, but I don't want to, I would need more water if I were you. But it's really how many, what do you want to deliver tonight to us? Obviously, there are 76 pages we can look through. We had a conference call at finance, I guess, was it finance? Facilities, there you go. But I guess go through, well, what else should we know, I guess?
Well, if I could, I'll just
go through. Yeah,
breeze through the rest of it, and if there are any questions, I can answer them. As they arise.
We're a group. We ask lots of questions.
And that's fine. I certainly want you to understand the content, and so we can go ahead. So our forecast basically looks at some of the things that's important with this slide are people when they look at population or enrollment forecasts, they're only looking at what's being added on to new construction, like I was talking about. You have to factor in, think of population in Ithaca. This is Ithaca, your population. Not only are you looking at in-migration, what's being added from housing and births, but you also have to factor who's moving out and deaths as well. So there's a lot of different factors. So if there's more deaths and more out migration, then there's in-migration and births, the population is going to start declining. If this is coming at a greater rate than these two, then your population is increasing. And that's what we're studying in the population model. We look at all kinds of demographic statistics when we start to calculate a population forecast, fertility, mortality, migration, and housing, local housing data. We create a population forecast. we look at age-specific fertility and mortality rates for each of the areas and develop those, and those help drive the population forecast, and also look at your historical enrollment to see how that compares. And then, as I said, we map out your data so that we can see your the mobility that exists. This is a population pyramid, so this is something that I'll just explain how you would do it. We put this in here. This basically shows us a demographic fingerprint for each of your attendance areas. So 0 to 4, your preschoolers, elementary age 5 to 9, middle schoolers 10 to 14, high schoolers are 15 to 19, and then you have the family formation 20 to 34, which is the 80% of all births occur in that age bracket, and then school-age kids, empty nesters, and turnover households. So you can see, when you look at the study, you can see how this pop forecast, or the pop pyramid, looks different for every single area, and this helps us understand if a population is stable. Typically, if you see a pop pyramid that's more like a pyramid shape, that means you have bigger cohorts in the childhood ages, and that would be indicative of enrollment growth. If it looks more like a tornado, that means that you have fewer students, fewer children in school age, and older population that's aging, and that means indicative of maybe a enrollment decline. If it looks like a pillar, it would be more of a stable population. So we can just go through. So this is your district total population. One of the things that's interesting, or that we had to do with Ithaca, that you see this is because this is college pop is included in here. So we did a lot of work to isolate the college population. I think the next slide shows this is your population without college students. So that we isolated the group quarters out, just looking at your college, just your population without college students. And you can see it's fairly stable. Your school age cohorts look more like a pillar. So if this was more like a pyramid, then you should have seen enrollment increase, a substantial increase. Or if it was more like a tornado, you should have seen substantial declines with the absence of migration. So this is a summary of findings, and I'm not going to get into too much detail on this, but we're basically seeing that your enrollment is very stable. Your elementary enrollment is forecast to increase. Your middle school enrollment is stable, and your high school as well is very stable. We can go to the next slide. One thing to note is that with your median age of your district, it's increased from 39.9 to 40.8. This includes this excludes the college population. So your median age is forecast to go up to almost 41 years old, which is getting up there. You know, the older population gets, the fewer kids that you're going to see showing up in schools.
So that's not an insignificant move, actually.
It's a very fairly small change. It's not as big as what we've seen in some other areas that we worked in. So these are the pop forecast results. One of the things to note, and I'm not going to talk about all of these, but we have a series of assumptions that we list for a pop forecast. These are things that are non-demographic factors that we cannot control. So these are, if we start to deviate from our enrollment, the enrollment forecast deviates from actuals in the next couple of years, we go back and look at this and what has changed in our assumptions to help to create changes in enrollment based on based on what we forecast, because our forecast is a demographic-based forecast. If it deviates from that, there are non-demographic factors in play that are factors that are not in our control that are causing changes. And this is another list of assumptions, and we basically hold things constant of what they are right now. The interest rates, the existing home sales, a lot of those things we keep we assume that they're going to remain at the same levels as they are now and what they have been the past 5 years or so.
Charter schools.
So here's your population. So your population is 66,000, 2010. And then we're at 67,320 in 2025. So this answers the question about the population. It is forecasted to grow, but it's growing. If you look at the differences in your in the cohorts, which cohorts are growing or declining, it's growing at different rates. Different age cohorts are growing. Your older population is growing at a faster rate, or you're going to have a larger older population than younger population. If you were to sort of split this in half, this side's growing more than this side. This is again population. This shows you population forecast by each elementary zone, because we break it down. Again, this is just the total population, not enrollment. And then this is I wanted to give you some statistics on what we're looking at. This is where the household population under 18, looking at the percentage of populations under 18, persons per household. So we're looking at those variables when we're studying each area and how each attendance area differs. Again, more data, percentage of householders aged 35 to 54, which is most likely to have kids. Over 65 are indicators of empty nesting. Percentage of householders who own homes, just so that we could see how things compare at the attendance area level. Single person households that are 65 plus. This is really a empty nest turnover variable. So the forecast results are basically what we have here. Your enrollment, elementary enrollment is 2639. It's very stable. It's forecasted in the end of the forecast at 2667. It goes up in the mid-years 2021. It's going to go up before it levels back off to similar to what it is now. Middle school is going to slowly increase throughout the life of the forecast from 1114 to 1260. Your high school is 1576. It ends at 1577, so it's very stable. And then that brings your total enrollment 5329 out to 5504. So really, you have a real stable forecast here. You're not seeing substantial increases or substantial declines. And I think this just gives some more statistics, breaking it down by school. And you can go to the next slide.
I have a question about that slide. I'm
Okay.
not sure if you know specifically, but are there reasons why, for example, Fall Creek has such a huge hike in enrollment? Is it because of the booming housing market in Fall Creek?
Fall Creek is it's probably it's a multitude of all of these variables. It's probably because it's a younger population in Fall Creek. The population is more likely to have children. Probably. All of the variables that we have studied indicate that that's an area that's going to continue to grow. And so looking at your historical enrollment, that supports it. Looking at the housing market, looking at the age structure and the demographics of the population in Fall Creek supports the notion that enrollment is going to continue to increase. One thing to note, we look at the percent change, but it's also it's a small number. So it's 24%, but it's off of a 200. So small numbers can sometimes show big percentages, but that's really the rationale for it. If you go look at the census variables that I just went over, you can see that all of those statistics kind of are indicative of growth or enrollment, school-age children, increases in school-age population.
So is that, those enrollments including the open enrolled, but you know how you had that other table that showed, the influx and the outflux, so those, how did,
when we get to the forecasted enrollment, that includes that we're taking all back to your historical enrollment. That includes open enrollment. Okay. So we're assuming those same rates of open enrollment occurring. This is a really cool table that we get from the Census Bureau that tells us the population totals by age, by single age. So you could see, for instance, and this is 2010 census, but you can see where there's stability here. If this started off high and was low, this would mean smaller numbers and go into higher numbers. It would mean that your younger kids are smaller numbers of younger kids than older kids, which means as older kids age up, they're being replaced by smaller cohort sizes,
Right.
which relates to enrollment decline. But you're pretty stable. You're kind of up and down. We're not seeing a downward spike here or anything like that.
It's a word I've heard a lot tonight. Stable.
Stable, yep. This gives us an idea of market share, so we can see your market share and what percentage of public to private and things like that. And this is what we use to help track that. And that's basically that's it. I have 30 other slides of individual school forecasts and things that I could go through, but I don't want to take any more of your time than is needed. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
No, absolutely. Questions for?
And your confidence level is how high?
We are 2%. We say 2% through the life of the forecast. So we have a 10-year forecast for you. At any point in time, the enrollment should fall within plus or minus 2% of what we forecasted. If it doesn't, then we start to look at what assumptions have been violated, to see if there may need to be an adjustment to what we've assumed. Maybe interest rates, maybe housing, existing home turnover rates, those types of things. But 2% is the answer, and it's not a compounding rate. It's each particular year. It's a 2% confidence interval. Okay.
So Matt, folks have had input. They've asked questions, about some of the slides and some of the info. Are they're going to make any adjustments to it to give us back, to address some of that? Is this our one shot at it? There's going to be a lot more back and forth from facilities. And
I have some notes on things to edits and different footnotes to put in. I can hold on making the final version until we give it a couple of weeks to see if there's any additional feedback, and then we'll issue a final report to you.
Right, and that was our opportunity tonight, was dig into this a little bit. We had an opportunity of facilities to get a first blush. That was on the phone, right? Mm-hmm. It's always nice to have you in person, so you can get the full effect of the questions. Anything else?
Yeah, when you answer the question, I think giving the board members a little bit of time to digest the information and sort of get some feedback would be great. I also wonder, and I don't know if this has already been talked about with Dr. Simons, but as the facilities committee starts having some of these conversations about another project that we may be going out with, will we have additional opportunities to have some conversations in terms of some of the specific forecasting that was talked about, say, in 5 months from now, right? If we have some questions, we can give folks a call and have a dialogue.
Sure, yeah. You can give me a call. I'd be happy to answer questions you have.
Great, appreciate that. Well, Matt, thank you for coming all this way and your time. It's great. Yeah, we appreciate the work.
Thank you.
And you will be hearing from us.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So thanks, Matt. And we do have a few more items, and students should certainly take off, because I'm sure you have things you want. We are almost done, though, but we do have our annual business, a resolution calling for the 2018 annual district meeting election of Ithaca City School District. Now, blah, blah.
Second.
There's lots of sections and all that. So this designates the voting spots and propositions as well, correct? Okay.
Simone, maybe I've been on the board too long. Maybe I just missed this. Proposition 3?
Do you want me to talk about it?
Sure.
The practice has been that there has not been a board of registration. The board of registration would involve 4 community members, and then I would meet with them annually. That has not been the practice. I had a conversation with Kate about that, because that's what's been reflected, and so it's very easy to do a resolution to abolish the Board of Registration and the district clerk would continue to do the same work that's been going on in practice.
So say that to me in plain English. What does that mean?
Instead of having a Board of Registration, it would just be the district clerk would handle all of the work with the registration, where I get the list of registered voters from the Board of Elections. I maintain the polls, the registration poll, the books, as I've been doing. It's just a cleaning up of the language. Kate can speak to it better than I could.
But I take it that this proposition and this resolution was not in place before?
No.
Right, so this is just cleaning up the legal
And
requirements, and obviously every election needs to be proper, legal, and go by the book.
Right.
And this is one of those by the book.
Right, so if I'm an unregistered voter, as it says here, and I want to vote in the election, how does this proposition change my
it
ability?
doesn't change that at all. It doesn't change that. It just eliminates a Board of
It
Registration.
currently calls for something that doesn't exist, Sean.
And there's a second part to it about the ongoing registration. So currently, like for instance, this year, on May 1st, from a certain time to a certain time, there's a 4-hour period of time, somebody can come and register personally with me if they're not registered with the Board of Elections. Rather than have a designated one day for 4 hours, now we're gonna have an ongoing registration. So anyone who wants to come and register can do it at any time throughout the year without it being isolated to that one day in that one period of time.
That's the problem. So in theory, it actually makes it easier for folks to come register to vote, participate in our election.
Yes.
That's how I read it, but I wanted to make sure that that was the case. No, because I think you're registering for the school board election. You're not registering
Right.
for the board,
That's
for
correct.
the county.
So there's two things, you can register with the Board of Elections, and once you register with the Board of Elections to vote in like a political election, that's the route, that's the list that I use for registration.
Okay.
Once you register with them, you register with me as well.
Yeah.
If you're not registered with them, but you want to vote in the school board election only, you have to register with me.
Okay.
That's the part.
And right now, it's only one day for a 4-hour period of time that they can come and do that, as opposed to an ongoing enrollment throughout the entire year.
Is that the plain English you were looking for?
Yeah, no,
But
absolutely.
if somebody were
Thank
to
you.
do that and to come and register with you only, would they understand that they were actually registering in
I always
general?
talk to them about that. I actually had a phone
Not by
conversation about today.
Right, because all that would happen in person, right? So
Right.
Jen would be able to
Right.
Can't do it
alert them of
online.
that nuance, right? That would just be for the school district.
And that's good for 4 years. So once they register, it's good for 4 years. As long as they vote within those 4 years, it's good for 4 years.
All right, appreciate that.
Proposition 2 is the small capital work that we do every year. This year it'll be at BJM. We'll be doing replacement and improvements of asphalt, the sub pump, windowsills and plaster. That's at Cuba Heights, and at BJM, we're gonna be doing concrete steps, railing and interior carpet and floor tile. That will be added to the amount of money that we need to purchase buses. We do that every year. We're on a 10-year replacement cycle for our buses, and so this year we'll be looking to purchase 9 buses. One of them has wheelchair capacity, the other are full-size gasoline buses. Proposition 1 is typically the amount of money that the amount of money that the voters approve that we are allowed to spend as a school district and levy the taxes there too. We've gone over the tax rate, and you have a number of budget documents for you to take a look at, including some talking points. We've done it in finance. Due to the number of presentations this evening, Dr. Brown and I will probably be teaming up at the next meeting to delve very deeply. Most of it will be budget oriented, but all of this is pretty much close to our final proposal for what we would like to see included in the budget. It is balanced at this point in time based on the revenue that we have and anticipate, and based on the expenditure that we know that we need. If we receive more state aid dollars, typically that happens from the governor's budget, but I'm not crossing my fingers. If that does happen, what we would do is we would actually reduce the amount of fund balance that would be going into the budget to balance this budget. So that would alleviate fund balance, put it back into sort of the savings, and then we would balance the budget with the additional state aid.
Got it.
One last thing, and maybe I'm missing again, Prop 3 is not, I don't see the question mark.
For the whereas?
Shall the district?
Shall the district?
Yep.
Oh, right, that's right.
So just there's something I just,
Yeah, that needs to be there, you're right.
All the way at the end, correct?
And this is the legal requirement, right, from New York State for us to put this into newspapers and to alert the public that we will be moving forward with, a budget vote, a board of education vote, and any propositions that will be there. So this is another, box that we happily check because we want to make sure that people are informed about what we're going to be taking forward to them.
And we are maintaining the 12 voting sites as we have in the past.
That is correct. Again, that to us is pretty important with access, and we've worked, in particular districts, buildings, to be able to ensure that once you get there, the access is also easier for you. So we've been doing that.
Right, some of the schools.
That's right.
Some of the, yep.
That's right.
Anything? Are we good? This has been moved, seconded. We good? I think we're good. All in favor? That is everyone. And there's another resolution here.
I'll move the appointment of election inspectors is presented.
Second?
Second by Pat. So we're going to have an election. We need election inspectors. They are listed. We good? All in favor? That's everyone, and Eldred is still in the room. All right, good. Something about another item, something about an academic calendar, a first reading of.
The school is going to probably talk about it just briefly.
I'll just give a very quick, you have the draft, I hope. Bob and I worked with Adam Paisecki using the BOCES calendar, which really rules an awful lot, which BOCES gets from the state calendar for regents. So everything goes back from there. You'll see we have 186 teacher days, 180 student days, all within both the teacher contract and state regulations. Students start on the 5th and 6th this year. One of the things I'm most happy about is we have 2 district conference days, PLC days, superintendent's conference days, depending on what you call them. This past year we only had 1, which cuts down in half what we get to spend time with teachers and staff. Helping them grow as teachers. We are maintaining the full day elementary parent-teacher conference days, which we started this year. We used to have 2 half days.
Right.
Teachers really spoke to us and said that's very hard. It's hard to have an effective morning and then have conferences in the afternoon. They do conferences all the time, so this was something that we happily worked on for them. And then the last day for students, you can see, is the 25th, and for teachers is the 26th. It's a pretty straightforward calendar.
And it's not going to be edited, changed going forward, right?
Don't answer that. We hope not.
And those who are fans of our meetings will know that a few years ago we voted on this multiple times. But
Yeah, right.
Yeah, so we think we spelled everything right this time,
Okay.
which is a
This is just a first reading. So. Sean, did you?
I'll withhold my questions.
There's more than one.
We will post this to our district website and ask for feedback from our community as we do in previous years, and then bring it back to the board for the next meeting.
I really don't know why we just don't coordinate with Cornell on this. We should be on vacation when Cornell is on vacation.
I'm sure we'll answer that
As
question.
if you're a college employee, that was one of my questions.
And I answered the question before, at one time, we used to alternate.
Yes, right. That's what I remember.
The spring break of IC one year and matched the spring break of Cornell.
Cornell the other year, yeah.
I don't think our demography study shows it, but a majority of our families don't work in those 2 institutions.
Well, since there are 2 out of the 3 major employers in town, someone's working there. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Maybe not with families.
I'll just settle for, can we just have the school day be in sync with the work day?
Good one.
Well,
Imagine
Meaning,
that.
but
Sure, the negotiation.
So did we move, I moved this calendar as a first reading?
You can do that, right?
I think we need to.
Yep.
Thank you, Chris. And
Nicole actually was
Yes.
seconded if we didn't hear.
oh, sorry. Sorry. Chris just. Okay. Thank you, Nicole.
Just follow the.
And you're right next to her. How do you explain this?
It's just.
Wow.
Well,
You know,
I'm not-
Pat, I'm just not sure.
Okay.
I'm not even going to accuse Chris of mansplaining. So that's, all right, that's fine. All in favor of the first reading? That's everyone. Thank you, without objection. And are we going to get to this? We're going to establish a district early childhood advisory council. You tried
We
Ann
tried last
before.
time, we-
And we are going to go ahead and discuss this. And you have a proposition or a resolution?
Yes,
Go ahead
we
and
are
move it.
moving to establish an early childhood advisory council that would consist of any board member who wished to join and a variety of community members amongst our community partners in it. So, that's
Right, you've been working on this proposal for a bit, going over the language, working with, you've gotten some feedback on this already.
Yeah, so I know it's really late, so I'll try to be quick. But it grew out of the kind of work that I've been doing partially as the liaison with the pre-K person and partially with Eldred and working with Daphne and Caitlin. And we've kind of started working with a lot of community partners like Tompkins Community Action. And what we've been finding is that if you define this as early childhood rather than pre-K, there's a kind of both a huge world of what happens with kids before they come into the school district, and it's not that well understood. Now, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of players and a lot of things that go on. So one of the things that we've been working on is really trying to understand what that landscape is and to get our district into a position to be able to apply to grant funding as it might become available at the state level. One of the things, for example, where better coordination makes sense is Tompkins Community Action actually opened up a new child care center last year. Their focus is on 3-year-olds. We deal with 4-year-olds. So figuring out issues of transitioning between the two, knowing what other people are doing, just seems to make a lot of sense. So, did you want to?
Yeah, just add a couple of things. If you look at it from the other perspective, the reports that we get, one recently delivered by the Child Development Council, figures that there are 6,500 kids in our area that do not receive any kind of daycare, any kind of educational support, any Head Start, any pre-K, pre-K is different, but any services outside of grandma or a private daycare provider. All those children are going to come to us. Well, 6,500 is the county, but a portion of those kids we know are going to wind up on our doorstep, right? 5 everybody's coming to us unless they go to Montessori for a few more years or maybe even Waldorf. But we don't really have a sense of the landscape, and that's what we're trying to get our hands on. What is the actual landscape of child care or early educational development for our children? What I've learned in this process is that our system in this community is, what's the right way to put it? I don't know how people navigate it, let's put it like that, right? If you have money, you flow into one system. If you don't, good luck. And those kids, of course, are going to come into our system, and we're going to have nice parties, and we're going to have nice book reveals saying if they could just catch up, they would be okay, right? But because of the way the system is designed, it's very tough out there for parents, very tough out there for young people. Another thing that these women are teaching me is actually, even if you're doing okay, getting from one side of this town to the other with your Volvo and you have 2 kids and you're trying to maintain a job, right, and the cost of child care exceeds the second income is a very, very complicated, difficult, stress-inducing proposition. So our goal is to somehow visualize all this and see where the district can lend its weight to affect organization, if not change. We really just don't know now what's going on and who's being affected by what.
And the last thing I should say is that one of the district goals is family engagement, and family engagement is a way that we build a successful relationship with children as they move through our district. And there's a huge amount of family engagement that actually takes place in these really early childhood years that is an incredible opportunity as we move forward throughout the district that we could build upon. So in a way, it's how do we define it? You know, is it just pre-K, like the pre-kindergarten thing, or is it early childhood all the way up, say, through second grade, looking at it as more of as a whole? So anyway, there's a lot of really interesting, I don't know, it seems like it's like our front door. Like, what is our front door? How do we begin this process of building these relationships?
So district-sponsored meeting, how often? Quarterly, monthly?
We've been meeting about every 6 weeks informally, I guess, so.
Are we looking for administrative support?
No, not really. And I think this would just be for this calendar, this year, right? And then it would be renewed if the board wanted to do that for the following year. So it would just be today.
Through the school year or the calendar year?
Through the school year, right? July 1, or whenever it expires.
Well, typically that would be.
Yeah.
We could talk about it after our votes too. We have that reorganization.
So, and just in terms to keep all the board members in terms of process, the board has the opportunity to do one of two things: an ad hoc committee, which comes and goes, there's no sort of expectation, or an advisory committee or advisory council, which can include folks who are not on the board. According to that process, policy 2260, the board president is to decide who has membership on either one of those, either the ad hoc or the advisory committee.
Who wrote that?
We wrote that years ago, so it is what it is. So what we decided is, rather than have the board president assign membership, that any board member could join that committee. So it's open to the entire board. And folks who are going to be joining that, there is an expectation that there'd be a written report submitted to the board for any advisory council. So there'll be some sort of formal closing of the loop. We can discuss what that looks like at some point in time. The
community partners would be invited.
Absolutely.
Obviously by whatever board members happen to want to be a part of this.
Yep.
And actually, I think I misspoke when you asked about administrative support, because Daphne Shalula, who is the pre-K, the person who oversees it, she's the kind of
right. I was just wondering about
administrative person that would be tying it all together.
Yep. Just wondering about expectations from,
No, but beyond that, no.
Okay, great. Was this moved, or do we have to vote on this?
We do.
We do have to vote on it. You talked about it. Did we move and second it, or?
I moved, but I don't think anybody seconded it, though.
I'll second it,
We needed some detail before we were going to second this. Okay.
but I'll second it.
Second by Pat. Now that it's been moved and seconded, are there questions, comments from the group? Nicole? I'm looking at Nicole.
Yes, I feel.
You sure? All right, okay. Sean, are we good? I mean, okay, I get a thumbs up. Okay, all in favor? Certainly sounds like a worthwhile cause. Another
Hold
meeting?
on, before you
Yeah,
ready to
hold
go.
on.
Sit down.
There's a couple things in other business we should be here prepared to talk about real quick, Heath, that's all.
All right.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, Sean, you're, are we looking to,
Yeah, we're prepared to vote now? All right.
oh, Dr. Brown.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity.
We've been busy, Dr. Brown, so we're, okay, we're back to Dr. Brown, okay.
Yeah, and I'll be brief. And I mentioned some of the updates around Infield Elementary and what we're thinking about doing with the community forum. I mentioned that earlier. And we will, hopefully at our next gathering, if not have already announced the date for those community conversations, but we'll be prepared at the next meeting to announce those dates. Again, we work with a third-party facilitator, we work with the BOCs, and some other folks to come in and help us with some of those conversations. In response to the young people and community members who came and asked us about anti-oppression or anti-racist curriculum, be looking at for the next ICSD Insider. We're gonna have a section in there talking about what is curriculum. So we're gonna define what our notion of curriculum is. One, we will be talking about our launching of an approach to develop anti-marginalization, anti-oppression curriculum that's developmentally appropriate for every grade level. And it will follow our case study approach, project-based learning approaches. So we anticipate having every young person in our school district have an opportunity to have a case study or project each year that's around anti-oppression. As an example, we want a first grader having conversations that are different than a middle schooler. A middle schooler may be ready to talk about the issues around race in class, whereas a first grader in a kindergarten may be talking about gender issues. So we hope to have something that's aligned to our curriculum, aligned to our standards, that's aligned to our approaches to teaching and learning, and we hope to start that development work this spring in collaboration with some community experts who are going to be helping us with that as well. More immediately, we are in the process of also setting up and hope to announce by our next board meeting opportunities for young people at our middle schools and our high schools to talk about race. One of the things we heard from folks was if we could, and when would it be possible for us to set up facilitated conversations, small group conversations, not whole group conversations or large school-wide conversations, but smaller group conversations to talk about race. We have connected with a community group who will be helping us facilitate that. We hope to bring in some community experts. We have community experts who've been trained on being facilitators of these talking circles. So we hope to bring those folks in to set up sessions at every one of our secondary schools. We hope that happens within the coming weeks. We have a meeting scheduled with our principals and our facilitators this week or next to outline those dates. So the curriculum development work is ongoing and will be kicked off soon. We'll have something in the Insider about that. Those sessions for young people and adults to talk about race in every one of our secondary buildings, we will have that within the next month. And we're also working on some other things, such as what would it look like to have a certification program for educators around culturally responsive teaching practices, and what would that look like in our professional development model if we had educators go through a series of workshops and trainings and have some observations in their classroom spaces and could be certified as a culturally responsive teacher educator in this regard. So a couple of things we're working on. We will be communicating them in our Insider, and we'll be sharing some dates with you, hopefully before at our next board meeting. Did I leave anything out, team? I covered most of it.
Any update on immunizations?
And no update. I've been waiting to set up a time to meet with the folks who've been coming to our meetings, but they have pushed those dates off. They want to gather more information or have nothing else to ask at this point. So at our last meeting, I asked folks to reach out to me if they had questions or suggestions for our protocols about how we implement that policy. And the only email we got was that they wish to just learn more and they haven't wished to meet with me so far.
Thanks, Dr. Brown.
Yeah, thank you.
Upcoming dates, Dr. Brown, on the 10th, that's when we're going to, are you doing the budget presentation?
Yeah, my health holds up. Yes, I do plan to be here. Stand up and present the budget to y'all.
You got your device, you can still get around. But, so, the 10th is important. That's when we're going to do a deep dive into the spending side, what this budget is going to look like, because we do have to vote on that budget in the coming weeks. So April obviously is an important month. The other dates are there. Anything else for the good of the group? Are we good? I think some of us probably need to stand up. And without objection, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.